Hi, and welcome to this session on what's new in financial management, GL Account Review. A new feature in the next release. It's a GL Account feature. It requires some setup, and then you can perform reviews. And let's just jump right into the feature and what it does. When I'm in my company and at period end, I often want to keep track of how far have I gotten in reconciling different accounts, in checking up on if I have all the vouchers or documents in my system. And for that purpose, I often go through different accounts, usually the balance sheet accounts, but it can be performed on any account. For example, I want to check my petty cash to see if I have all the entries. I can open the ledger entries, I could export it to Excel and keep track of it. But now we've introduced a new feature called GL Account Review. So I pick the account, I can pick home and review entries, and it will open a new page. You can see I've been busy this morning, where I can review the entries and where I can follow along whether I have checked a given entry or not. It's a simple marking feature. It just sets a checkbox when I've reviewed or set it as reviewed. And I can also unmark it so that when I'm running my reconciliation at period end, I can choose to say show the reviewed entries to see if they're there. I can show the hide the reviewed entries, so I only have the ones that need review. And I can of course get back to all my entries. In this one, we saw that I started, so let's just continue. For this one account, I have just said I want a review indication. So the policy is set to allow a review. And that enables me just to select any number of accounts and set them as reviewed. When I do that, my user ID will be logged in the reviewed by. It will have a date and a timestamp, and it will have a sequential number attached to it so that I can see which entries were performed as part of the same review. I can also, if I make mistake, I can just select an entry and say this one is not reviewed, and it will delete my entries and set the number to 0. Of course, I can then later go in, I'll hold the control down and mark it again. So it's a simple feature to track how far have I gotten. Of course, I can export it to Excel. I can use the filter pane. And of course, when you're reviewing your account at period end, this feature also works with the analysis mode that you can turn on. And in here for the analysis mode, I've created a pivot table so that I can see the critical numbers for whether like accounts that have been reviewed and the ones that haven't been reviewed, just so I can follow along. I could add other groupings to it, but it works with this new feature. So you saw that I reviewed one account. The account setting that determines whether you can perform a review or not is called review policy. And in this one, a review was allowed. You can also set it to none, and that will blank out the actions. You'll be able to see what's in there, but you will not be able to perform reviews. So it's basically a blocker. You can perform reviews, and you can also set it to match balance. And that means that when you do a review, debit and credit for that review must match before you can set it. And we actually have an account where that review policy makes sense, and that's the prepaid rent. If you go in, and now we'll just go straight to reviewing the entries. You can see it contains a lot of rents that have been deferred in different periods. And maybe you want to keep track of, like, was that expense or rent expense in this case totally deferred? Like, have you deferred everything and used it? You want to keep track of it if they're, for example, mixed. So in this case, it's pretty easy. They all they sort of go next to each other, like, or in group. That's pretty simple, but it could be mixed because of the dates. This one, I pick all of them for a single invoice that has been deferred for 3 months, and I can select them because the debit and credit matches. If I select a random entry or maybe a few random entries and say select as reviewed, the system will tell me that the review policy, and you can also see that at the bottom, is set to be allow reviewed and match balance. So I will not be able to mark these entries as reviewed until I mark all of them. The same goes for when you unmark something. Let's pick these ones and say they should have been part of it. Obviously they should, because you wouldn't have been able to mark them if it weren't the case, but sometimes you flip the policy. If you set them as not reviewed, the system will also tell you that debit and credit doesn't match and you have set it to match balance. So you won't be able to do that. So there's a new feature, but in some local versions we already had a feature, and what are we going to do about that?
Yeah, so thank you, Brian. And when we started out on this feature, we had a idea from Microsoft Ideas that mentioned they already had this functionality with reviewing on the French version and wanted something similar, or at least like a more coherent feature that encompassed all the different localized versions, which was the one from Netherlands, Belgium, and France. And to do that, we have created this review GL entries feature. And the way we encompass the different functionalities was using this review policy that Brian also showed, so the non-allow review and allow review and match balance. The match balance was something that was exclusive to the Netherlands and Belgium, and from the French version we took the reviewed identifier because we thought that was very neat that you could quickly group GL entries that you've reviewed together in a single group. So the review GL entries page that Brian used to review all the entries before, we have a set of behaviors defined on an interface that we call GL entry reviewer, and that is to allow partners and people to make extensions of this feature in a very seamless manner by just creating their own implementation of this interface, which defines these 3 behaviors. It has the review entries, as we saw, and unreview entries, and the validate entries. And the validate entries is to validate that the entries that you are reviewing or unreviewing match the policy. For instance, you could use this validate entries to verify that the credit and debit matches, and also that the review policy is not none. If so, it would throw the error as we saw before. And to switch between these different implementations, we use an enum which implements the interface, and you can extend this with your own implementations. So when you set up the feature for the first time, if you have created an extension of this GL entry reviewer, you can select which one you want to use on a page called GL entry review setup. And this page is an administration page where you just select from a drop-down which implementation you want to use. And that happens on the first time you launch the page if there are more than one implementation, which is the default implementation, of course. And the way we have extended the GL entry table is with these flow fields, which you can see on the review GL entries page from before, the reviewed field, reviewed by, reviewed date, and reviewed identifier. And this information is inferred from this satellite table that we have created called GL entry review entry, and it contains the GL entry number as its primary key, reviewed identifier, reviewed by, and the reviewed date is just the system modified at date for this table. So whenever you unreview an entry, the record corresponding to that review is removed. Yeah, and we suggest doing this because it avoids cluttering the GL entry table with more fields than it already has. And they are only loaded when you're actually loading the review GL entries page.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. And I hope you will start using this new feature. You can engage with us on Yammer or Twitter. You can also, when you've started using the feature and have new ideas for it, or maybe ideas for changing the feature, you can submit your ideas on BC Ideas. I hope you like the feature, and thank you for watching this video.